All right. My guest on the podcast today is my new friend, I could say. We've had a good time talking so far. Chris Krug. He's the CEO of Franklin News Foundation and the publisher of The Center Square, based out of greater Chicago area. Chris, I'm looking forward to this one, man. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Paul, yeah, this is going to be a good time, and I'm fired up to be here. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you. You've been listening. I start every show the same. Could you just tell us a little bit about your background and kind of your career? Just to kind of set the stage for folks listening out there.
Yeah, you bet. So I've been in the journalism business for, I guess it's technically now more than 30 years. I saw a bio. Somebody had asked to have a bio of mine for a speaking engagement, and it went out and said I'd been in the business for 25 years, and I said, well, it's longer than that. I started actually working in newsrooms in the late 1980s, and yeah, so I mean, I don't know how many years it is total, but it's over 30. I started at the Erie Times in Erie, Pennsylvania, when I was in college, interning there, and had my first opportunity to work full time in my college town in Meadville, Pennsylvania, at the Meadville Tribune. From there, I went to the Chicago suburbs, where I was I don't know, I think I was maybe 26 at the time, and into management for the first time, formally into management at the Northwest Herald, working for the Shaw family, and then to the Denver Post for parts of a couple of years, and then back to Chicago. And, along the way, it's, I'm one of those people that grew up in the analog era where you had to do all the jobs in the newsroom, right? I mean, I started my career in sports, literally punching agate, a phone pinched against my neck and typing in, girls volleyball box score information and things like that. And ultimately I worked my way up, through the editorial side, and then jumped across the fence after September 11th into news. Went back to Chicago from Denver, which was kind of a rough move. I mean, I was grateful that my family, understood. I think it was just because we had literally, they had just gotten there. And shortly after, my wife and our then very young daughter and my mother was living with us at the time, I was like, I don't think this is going to be a long-term deal. And so, I did. I kind of did a reboot in my early 30s, but it was the best thing maybe that I ever could have done, because it opened up an entire, sort of new way of thinking about, what news can be. So that practice that I got from being a sports writer early in my career, and like I said, I started in sports, where you've got to file, in some cases, 2 or 3 stories 30 minutes after a ball game is over. Or, I covered the NHL, a lot of close games where the game's not really decided. You've been writing about it the entire way, recasting a lead and then getting that out with the other 2 stories that, that you'd been working on over the course of that night, having them all align and getting them to the copy desk in short order. But, for me, September 11th was kind of the moment, where I just had this epiphany. I was working in sports. I was the deputy editor overnights at the Denver Post. And it wasn't so much that I didn't love what I was doing, and I did. I just thought that there was maybe something more important, for me to be doing. So I made that move to news, went back, remediated, I think, in the eyes of a lot of different people. I'd gone from a metro back to, a suburban daily. But as I said, it exposed me to a whole different array of opportunities. I think I was 35 by the time I became an editor, like the editor, like a top editor. So that ascension really moved forward very, very quickly. And I was able to take all the learnings that I'd had, along the line of, best practices and structure and, certainly quality of journalism, how to get to the highest, best form of daily journalism. And that was good. And along the way, I got my MBA, and then I moved over, into publishing, and kind of, say I've been there. I would like to tell you that I've been there ever since, but I took a 4-year break from the industry. I was fired at the Chicago Sun-Times in 2012. And at the time, I mean, I would tell you, it was somewhat soul crushing, but it was the best thing in the world, because I had to go and see the industry, I think, from the outside to make sense of what the industry could be next. And while that wasn't easy at the time, it was probably the best thing that I could have done. I was the president of a creative agency for a couple of years and actually worked in business with businesses that, that needed to get something done. And it was in the franchise space where the sort of the systems approach to how they produce what they produce. And these were highline brands. I mean, brands that everyone would be familiar with. And then, I actually was talking to a friend of mine and complained somewhat about my travel schedule because it was pretty brutal. I'd be on the road, 4 cities in 3 days, that kind of stuff. A lot of client-facing meetings and a lot of deliverables. And ultimately, that led to me being offered an opportunity to take over international business development and to go and see the world. And I was able to bring all that perspective back when I returned to journalism to take over what then was the Illinois News Network way back in 2016. And that was the precursor to the build that we've done, with the Center Square. And great experience, so working in for-profit journalism, getting outside of journalism, then going into nonprofit journalism, I think at the right time. That's kind of where the industry is moving now. I've been in this space now for 10 years. And also we own for-profit companies, which we're glad to talk about sort of all that from a business perspective as we go on.
Yeah, I wasn't aware. I'm not well informed enough that a nonprofit can own for-profits. I guess that makes sense. I didn't know that was a thing, just on the structural side of it. But yeah, we can get into that. Could you talk a little bit more about the Center Square? Because it's primarily, I'll just let you give me a little overview of it.
Well, right. So, I think we're, most news brands are working to build an on-page audience and trying to bring the entire world, sort of to whatever their URL might be. When we were thinking about what is the available opportunity in the market and what is, what the industry needs the most, I never lost touch with the people that I grew up in the business with. No matter what I was doing. And, I was there for the beginning of the economic downturn. 2007 was the best year that newspapers ever had. 2008, the housing crisis, just completely changes what's going on in the industry in terms of local markets. And at that same time, broadband availability, is coming up. So, this whole internet thing that might be a fad, which is really kind of, where I was at the beginning of my career. I was one of the evangelists for digital news and digital media, like when that was absolutely not cool. I'd be standing up in front of a room full of people, and again, I was a little ahead of time, with regard to being a number one editor. At 35 years old, I had a lot of future ahead of me, and a lot of the people that I'd be talking to, they didn't, and they were willing to sort of ride it out, and we're very much kind of clinging to the analog era. But when we created the Center Square, the idea is what does the industry really need now? And I think a meaningful competitor, the Associated Press, a news organization that that doesn't try to do everything that the AP does, because the AP is massive. But to focus on what the AP once was good at, that it no longer really was having, I think, member partner success any longer, was around the coverage of government and government accountability, right? The sort of that down the middle, no opinion, here's what was going on in the legislature today, or here's what's going on in this particular city, in the last 24 hours, or at the federal government. Of course, when we started, not to make it sound like too Steve Jobs like, but it was really, 3 or 4 guys working out of our offices or garages or wherever we had space, and we were largely fully remote at that point. But the idea was that there was an opportunity, and that the opportunity was to kind of go back to what was once, I think, an applied and appreciated tenet of journalism. No opinion, no solutions journalism, specifically around government accountability. And then looking at the news from a taxpayer's perspective, because I think it opens up the broadest audience and ultimately delivers the most relevant view on what government is doing. For the benefit of the readers to see what the return on investment is for them. This new program is going to cost X, it's going to do Y. and it's supposed to have this solution. We'll call that Z for the sake of keeping this in in the form of an equation. And, like that sounds like really, really simple, but there weren't a lot of people practicing this. I mean, journalism in particular at the metros and certainly at the AP so kind of wandered off and is doing, it's doing something different. And so this was kind of a return to a tradition that actually made sense and worked. And so, now, here we are about, we'll be 7 years old in May. We're producing somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 original stories a day that are designed to be, short and to move, again, no opinion, straightforward with that taxpayer perspective in it, size, scope, cost, and effectiveness of local, state, and federal government. And we've built, our audience, our member partner audience to over 1,300 across the United States. Decision data tells us that we reach 141 million U.S. adults every day. And again, most organizations that are out there that are building whatever it is they're building, they're thinking about sort of having their own audience on their own platform. But the real need in the market was for this. I mean, that the local locals can get to what they think is most important in their markets. And some of that is news, some of that is community, some of that is local culture, certainly local sports. And so, we come in and we offer, what we offer, and it fills a massive gap. Right. I mean, and so what we've laid out has matched the needs in the market. And we're thrilled to have the kind of support that we have from the people that utilize us and to see that our work, stands up against the journalistic test. And we produce enough of it that we can provide, frankly, options that just don't exist other places in the market.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's kind of one of the tenets of why I started this show is, or that I've always had, because I don't have a journalism background, but I've just always had this, I don't know, subconscious feeling that local information and news is much more important to most people. National politics, or I can find that anywhere, but here I live in a town of 20,000 in western Colorado.
Yep.
And there was a bunch of drama, like a recall for one of the county commissioners last, it's like a hyper local level,
right,
last year. And that was much more important to my life. So I see where whatever the administration is doing or whatever. And I mean, that might vary by who you're talking to, but
and there's way too much emphasis on what's going on at the federal level,
right,
versus what's going on at the local and state level. I mean, so much of our lives are framed out by what our local officials are thinking about doing, talking about doing, and then ultimately doing. And then, of course, the state that we live in. I mean, it's not the United States of America; it's the United States.
Yeah.
And so, what life is like in Colorado versus what life is like in Illinois are radically different. I mean, your place here in Illinois, your taxes would probably be literally 3 times what they are in Colorado. It pains me that the house that we owned in Arvada, which I drive by when I every so often when I come back and visit Denver, it looks exactly the same. Yes, they've had to paint it because everything in Colorado has to be painted every 3 or 4 years. You're going to lose your cedar.
Yep.
But that $350,000 house that we bought in 2001.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine right now.
Yeah, it's a $900,000 house now, and meanwhile, here in Illinois, and the taxes on it are I think less than $4,000 a year, and that includes everything, schools and whatnot. And the house that I bought here in the Chicago suburbs, and I don't even live in Cook County, right? I mean, I don't even have the shadow of Cook County, sort of pulling me down. The house that we bought for $367,000, in 2004 is, I think my tax bill is $13,000 this year.
Wow.
And 72% of that goes to schools, and schools aren't exactly as good as they used to be, I would say. And now I'm being kind. So yeah, I mean, so the things that go down at the local level really, really do matter.
Yes.
What happens at the state and at the federal level certainly have some impact. But, I think what's going on in local news is so incredibly important. And the sources for that, gosh, they're in a fight for their lives,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really good example of how much more relevant it's kind of like I said, it's the whole premise of this whole show kind of is how much more important that what you just laid out the example is than in most cases what a national international store or policy decisions are. I didn't have this exactly in the prep, but I got to dig in a little more now
Yeah,
on
yeah,
the center square.
sure.
So you said you're doing like 65-ish stories a day going out. So I guess I'll break it into two. The first one is what's an example of the kind of stories you're putting out on the wire, and like what is your team doing? Like, where are you getting data? Where are you sourcing these things? Like, can you talk a little bit about the mechanics on that end?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's a great question. So, I mean, when we first started, we didn't have the ambition of covering the entire country, right? I mean, that wasn't the notion. I mean, I don't know that we, got to that point until maybe, about 5 years in. And so that, the staff that we once had, like literally was 4 or 5 people, is now between in the newsroom alone. I mean, 40 plus full-time people plus another 15 to 20 contributors. We built an internship program. We built an apprenticeship program. And so now we have people that are, sort of like, this looks a little bit more like something that you could do some work with, right? Than where we started. We're fanned out across the country. I mean, the business itself is fully remote. Yes, we have a headquarters here in Chicago. I don't spend a lot of time there because there's not a lot of there. And frankly, the vast majority of my work and the work of the people on the team is out in the field. So, the best source of information as a journalist is direct. And so, what we've done is we've strategically positioned our people around the country, primarily, near state houses or metropolitan cities that have access to state houses. And we've turned them loose, primarily focused on, certainly during the legislative session seasons. And they're all different. I mean, as people around the country know, some don't even occur like every year, right? And others, occur, but they do, maybe only like 6 weeks. Whereas in Illinois, I mean, the legislature runs, say, from like, I don't know, January 10th, Memorial Day weekend. In Pennsylvania and a place like Michigan, it's running all the time. And they open session, they close session, they bring people back, they send people home, but it operates, 12 months of the year. So, I mean, I think that one of the biggest gaps that we've been able to fill and sort of where we've made our bones as an organization is that tight watch on state government. Our keen interest would be in the mechanics of legislation as it's making its way through the process. The vast majority of Americans don't really even have time or haven't been able to find a source that allows them to make the time to see what government's doing in real time in a way that makes sense to them. And so, very much in bricklayer English every day, we are just writing about what's in front of us, what's going on, and consolidating that into stories that are typically, 600 words or fewer, and then moving them as quickly as we can. Now, on top of that, as we've gotten, to be a bigger and certainly more sophisticated, journalism operation, we've added an enterprise and investigative unit, and they got going in October, and they're able to do, bigger state takeouts, multi-state takeouts, national takeouts on trends, things that are, that are happening, that are in the news or should be in the news. And so, with those two sort of approaches combined, and the team being relatively small enough that it can be, managed under a single operator. Dan McCaleb is our chief content officer and executive editor. What we're able to generate is a meaningful flow of consistent content that lands in my vernacular, on brand, straight news, no solutions journalism about what's happening, and without opinion. That's another thing that's a key point of differentiation for us. We will, for the benefit of our republishing partners, pick up op-eds, and we don't produce that many of them. Maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of two to three a day, but that's not an account of the stories that we're flowing. And again, we're just making them available for the partners that have editorial pages. But that steady drumbeat all day long of what's in the news, what's happening specifically around government and government accountability.
Very cool. And also, sorry, still just digging into the center square. How's is the business model kind of? I know it's a nonprofit, which we can get into in a minute.
Yep.
Is it kind of in the model of the AP? It's like a subscription service from the people. Is that how it works? Or you may have told me before on our first call, but it may have
No,
escaped me.
this is a good question, right? And I mean, and for the for the people in the industry that are out there, I mean, who don't know us or haven't had a chance to meet us yet, right? I mean, our approach to this is different. The foundation itself is supported by philanthropic contribution plus the businesses that we own. And so we have two
Right.
for-profit businesses, right? We own the Illinois Radio Network, which is 101 stations that cover all 102 counties across the state of Illinois. And that's a barter agreement that we have with our affiliates. So what we do is we produce the meaningful, useful daily news and sports 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, that they utilize throughout their, through their programming day. So we're slotted into the clock, 5 news at 5 minutes to the hour, or 5 minutes after the hour, however they choose to do it, updated throughout the day. And then we also own a company called Blue Room Stream, and it is affectionately known in the state as the C-SPAN of Illinois. So basically live streamed nat sound. So there's no commentary or anything that lays on top of it. The House hearings, committees, any kind of general session for both the House and the Senate. If the governor is going to say something, that day, we'll have that and we'll live stream this to an audience. So that in combination with the philanthropic, grants that we receive and the gifts that we receive as a foundation, which is really on the reader side has exploded. We have just this diversified stream of revenue that comes into the organization, but we're doing all of the things that we're doing on, about $7.5. I think we'll be somewhere between $7.5 and $8.5 million a year, which, I'm probably the most proud of that, right? It's like I actually got my MBA and I actually kind of used it to build this. For the members or the partners that utilize our content, we don't have any pay requirement with them. What typically the way that we would go about doing any kind of gift request from any of our partners is to say, look, if we're providing value to you and you're finding us useful and you want to see us to continue and to succeed and do more of what we're doing, consider making a philanthropic gift to the foundation. And some of them do. And that, literally in this space, every dollar matters, but we're not a profit incentivized operation, which makes this different. I just have to come out to some ballpark zero at the end of the year, or have a little bit of operating cash left to get the next year started. And then we crank the wheel back up again. So when we have subscribers that come, that are allowing us to drive, commercial revenue, technically inside the nonprofit, we're able to sell advertising across the Illinois Radio Network in that trade system. And then we have multiple streams of philanthropy that come into the organization. And we've been able to, be very, very good on the expense control side as a business, and just build as much as we're capable of building every year, which is kind of that's like the nature of business, right?
Yeah,
and so, yeah.
Yeah, you and I on our initial call, we talked about both kind of business head guys, and you just said that, when you got your MBA, then you actually used it. That kind of leads me into my next question. When you were kind of talking about your bio,
yeah,
I like the way you framed it as you're almost like a 5-tool player. Like you came up on this journalism side and then went to the business side and then left and worked at a separate business with other businesses. So it's like you've really been in depth on both sides. And a recurring theme on the show is that editorial business side divide. And I think the question I had for you was, let me pull it up here exactly. So that divide between editorial and business, what could each side learn from the other? I'll just leave it at
that's
that.
A great question. And it's tough because
right?
For years, and I've heard this from some of the other guests that have come through, said in different ways. And the vast majority of people who come on, they're newsroom leaders, who have spent their entire careers. Some of them 40 plus years, where they've just purely looked at sort of like, well, we've got to get a paper out, or we've got to get the news of the day out, right? So there's no question that there's always been like this underlying tension between editorial and the business side. I mean, for us, I mean, we don't really expose our people at all to the business side of what we do, and that's important, right? You know, I mean that firewall between, you know, the we have people that are on staff to go out to get revenue, and who their responsibilities are to fuel the business of journalism. But, you know, when the business side leads, and I think I might have said this to you, you know, journalism gets looked at as a cost center. And when editorial operates without any awareness of sustainability, I mean, I'm just thinking about like kind of what's going on in Pittsburgh at the Post-Gazette. I saw this interview with Paul Zeiss, who's a sports columnist, has been there for years. And I just randomly had an opportunity to play golf with him a few years ago at an event in Pittsburgh. And he's talking about, you know, like the whole battle between the News Guild and the Block family, and what did it ultimately get? Well, I mean, the newsroom won, you know, you know, the National
Yeah,
Labor Relations
exactly.
Board.
One.
But now the future of the organization is in doubt, and I believe they're supposed to shut down in, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 6 or 7 weeks, right?
I think, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, I mean, I think for me more than anything else, you know, and not to reiterate, but when editorial operates, you know, we have a team of journalists that don't understand that there is an actual business you know, an application that's occurring here, and then you have a problem. So we talk about, you know, frankly, inside of our company a lot about us and our place in the market, why it's important, you know, that we are very much on brand with regard to the way that we cover the news, because we're trying to systematically provide and meet an expectation every single day, so that when an editor will pick up a story from the center square, A, they have a clear frame on the perspective, and B, they've got 600 words of useful copy that's telling a story that they otherwise wouldn't have. And that allows to make the wheel to turn, right? And so, you know, it's a tough space for the organizations that haven't looked at journalism as being like their primary product. And so, you know, I think where nonprofit gets it right is, you know, we're not an ancillary piece, though we are the business. And so we're only going to be as good as an organization as our journalism allows us to be. And that's tough, because those pivots, especially in local markets, may not seem to be all that obvious. But we've both seen, I think, over the arc of the last, I don't know, what is it now? 2008, people started to get really panicky. So we're talking about 16 years. I mean, the newsroom cuts and the marketing cuts were among the first to be made, and they've been somewhat steady. And the business side hasn't necessarily adapted in the ways that they could have, should have. I mean, like, we owned news as an industry in 2007. Like, we owned news. TV was built off the backs of print journalists. Radio was built off the backs of print journalism. Digital, you know, as it was coming on, was still built off the backs of print journalism. And yet, you know, we let the business modeling kind of get away from us. And as an industry, part of it was like, literally, like, I mean, I'd go and have these do these speaking engagements, because we were doing out of the box things in 2005 and 6 before broadband. Like, we were live streaming high school football. You know, we were live streaming congressional debates, live streaming the school spelling, we had laid the groundwork for what the industry is now. We were even doing like a daily, we called it the quick cast. We did like a 5-minute digital news brief that ran front and center on the homepage of nwherald.com. I mean, we were doing this way, way, way long time ago. But now these are the things that are like, oh, well, what if we do this? And what do we do? Yeah, do them. I mean, because, I mean, you need reasons for the people in your local markets to come back and see the value that you're able to create.
Yep. Yeah. Well said. It's just every time I get to ask that question on the show, I love when people have both. I just had a guy on down in, I'm confused. He's in Texarkana. He's either in Texas or Arkansas. There's a street that runs through his town, and I forget which side he lives on. But he's the general manager and the editor of the Texarkana Gazette, I think.
Yeah, it's a big job.
Yeah. Yeah. When I asked him kind of a similar question, he was like, you know, when I was in college, I was the publisher of the school paper. And they gave him kind of free reins to do, I don't know, some big holiday edition. And he's like, I almost bankrupted the paper because he's had no concept of the costs involved with all that. He's like, that was
Right.
a really good early kind of learning experience. And
Yeah.
now he literally does both sides for a living. It is a big job from the sounds of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And I'm
cool.
rooting for people like that. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like,
Yeah.
and I think it's, the mindset that he's probably taken is not different from the mindset, that I've taken, over the arc of my career, and it's certainly applied now is, you hire the best people to do their best work in the time that's allotted. I
Yep.
mean, and that's it. That's still the daily miracle,
Yep. Let me ask you kind of while we're on the topic a little bit, because
Yeah.
nonprofit, for-profits come up a few times.
Sure.
There's a big push towards nonprofit news, and
Mhm.
I'm agnostic. I have people from both sides, for-profit, nonprofit on there. But I think a lot of folks that I've talked to, not necessarily on the podcast, but just have calls with,
Yeah.
seem to think that it's almost like a magic bullet going nonprofit for like a news organization, you know?
Sure.
And like everything, I've had 4 or 5 people on this show who say like, yeah, you still need to make money, as a
Yes.
nonprofit. You still need to go find it and everything.
That's right.
So I guess I don't really have a question. Just curious if you have any thoughts on that also, because since you've run businesses, you run a nonprofit now. It's generally, like you said, generally the same, still running a business with your MBA skills on the background. Do you have any thoughts
Yep.
there?
I think that, well, I'd offer, I guess, maybe whatever insight that I have. My thought on it is this: is that you have to have a business plan. I mean, regardless of what which way you're going to go, and if you're going to be a hybrid, which the vast majority of metros have created now foundations, even like the AP, you know, which has always been a nonprofit, has created a separate, I believe it's a separate, like has a separate EIN, for foundation work. What is the work you're going to do? Who are you? What are you all about? And what is your mission? Right. I mean, and if you can be clear on that, and if you can stick with that, then the people who would be interested in supporting that mission, they're going to say yes, and the people who are not interested in supporting that mission, they're going to say no. And that's the nature of the philanthropic side of the industry. I think where journalism is running down a razor blade right now is that you have some old school ethic that still exists in a lot of U.S. news, and now there is this new kind of like shiny object to do quote unquote lab reporting, or some kind of sponsored reporting where that might not be completely in alignment with who you are, what you do, and what you're all about. And I think that the prevalence of this is starting to change what we're seeing in news from even big players. I would say even from big players. I mean, and I have no idea like what the grant agreements look like. I mean, that's typically something that's not disclosed. But if you are renting yourself out for this new revenue stream by writing about things that you don't genuinely have an interest in, or really not kind of in the in the center of the plate for you as a news organization, and you're doing that to prop up the organization, that's ultimately going to come back to you in a negative way, because of what I think is also coming along with this, which is a complete lack of disclosure about that reporting. So you've got this new sort of wave of categorical reporting that's starting to wash its way through, whether it's about education being funded by pro-education organizations, or climate being funded by let's really get after what's going on with the climate, or whatever it might be, that has an influence ultimately over what the end user, your readers, are experiencing. And I'm waving a cautionary flag to the industry around that specifically, because I don't know that there's been a lot of perspective that has been shared. I mean, one of the things I think that sets us apart is, we're very clear on what it is that we're interested in and what it is that we're out there to do, right? I mean, it's government accountability reporting, and we're going to keenly focus on taxpayer issues because I think it is the highest integrity approach to covering government. And there's something in it for literally everyone. So, it'll be interesting to kind of see where this all goes. But I mean, as businesses are, commercial entities are now kind of moving into nonprofit space and adding on foundations. It's like, can they stay true to their core? Do they even understand what this looks like? And having started with this perspective, so again, it was either like, I like this idea or I don't. I mean, you got some of these legacy publishers have been around for, more than 100 years, and they've been doing what they've been doing, largely the same way through world wars and through recessions and through, whatever. I mean, everything that we've experienced as a country. Now, all of a sudden, they are experts in subject matter that they never really focused on before and might not have a whole lot to do with what's going on locally. Is that good for local journalism? Is that not good for local journalism? I guess it depends,
Man, that's why I love doing this podcast. As soon as you start talking about the labs, I guess you could say that is like the buzzword for them.
Yeah.
I've seen the rise of that type of organization, and I never put that together. But you're completely right. It resonated instantaneously when you were talking about it. That, like, wait a minute, what are there folks different incentives kind of behind this? So that's a good cautionary flag to put out there. Really cool.
Well, and the prevalence of this too, Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, you got some newsrooms now. I mean, and you don't have to work too hard to find this. You go through the masthead and then down into the staff list, and you'll see it. Like, I mean, at the Seattle Times, I don't want to get the number wrong, but it's like, I don't know, 18, 20% of the staff is attached to labs and on the news side. And it's like, well, that's a lot, isn't it? I mean, does that mean that 1 out of every 5 stories that you're reading is basically sponsored content?
Right.
I mean, I remember the massive pushback that existed, and for all the right reasons, about advertorials, where, like, the ad side's like, hey, I got this great idea. We're on the homepage, we're going to do this story about this furniture store and how they're, their kiln dried hardwood furniture just, is like just so much better, than this, that, or the other. And that runs like, right. It would say sponsored content on it, maybe not as obvious as advertorial or anything like that, but is running in the same space. The problem isn't the lab work per se. It's that the lab work has not nearly enough of a disclaimer attached to it. And I mean, we all know, from like Pew studies ongoing, that like only 1 out of every 4 Americans can even tell opinion from straight news.
Right. Yeah.
And so, we talk about this whole media trust thing, and the media trust numbers, I mean, 28% per Gallup, at the end of last year, 8% of Republicans trust the news. I mean, it's like, well, this isn't good, right? And only, I think it was 50-some%, Democrats trust the news too.
Well, even that's not good. I mean,
that's not good. No,
that's not a good number either. I think.
No, none of it's good.
No, crazy. I'm going to stop asking follow-up questions, Eric, because I could talk to you for too long.
I'm enjoying
coming up. I have another call coming up in a little bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about AI a little bit.
Yeah.
I have to ask everybody, because it's crazy how fast it's moving. It's interesting. It's a huge topic. But what are your kind of takes on it? Are you guys using any tools, like in your newsroom or in your organization?
Well, I mean, and to your point, it feels like, I would say, in like the last 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, Orphe Divangi and I, we do the Everyday Economics podcast that runs across the Center Square network. And, I mean, we were talking about AI, and it felt very futuristic when we were talking about it last year. And I really feel like in the last 3 or 4 weeks, so let's call it a month, it's like everything seems to be on like hyper speed.
It's not just you. I've been asking the same. I had Pete Paschal on from the Media Copilot.
Yeah.
He does similar show, a lot of AI. And he said his workflow right now, this is last week, is rapidly different than it was in January of this year. So anyway, sorry, it's not just you. Because I thought it was just me noticing this too.
But no. I think we're all just kind of, like boiled frogs. We're kind of,
pretty
coming
much.
up on this.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I mean, I've got an open idea, or I have open ideas around AI. But I would frame them this way. I really think that, it's anything that moves through AI has to be like a 3-step process, right? I mean, human input, AI generated response, and then, human decision making. right? So, I mean, the idea of turning things over to AI completely not ready for Skynet, in the business or in the industry or, broadly. I don't think well, rather than to tell you what I don't think, let me tell you what I do think. AI is a terrific tool. I mean, let's say that you're a new reporter and you get dropped into the Illinois State House, and you've never covered state government in this particular state before. You have no idea why a gallon of gasoline costs 35 cents more than it does in, say, Wisconsin or Iowa or Missouri or Kentucky or Indiana, the states that surround us. I mean, you could easily use AI to figure out where the taxes that were added to the cost of gasoline, when they occurred, how much they were, and what was driving it. And even you could ask AI, like, what was the idea behind this? Why did we, why as a state did we decide to do this? To help you to inform your reporting. Now, that's great. You've got that result. Now you've got to verify all that information. But I mean, at least you got a consolidated, you're thinking about stories and where stories come from. I mean, they're built on facts. So like the person who walks into the State House for the first time, the State House didn't start the day you walked in. So having some perspective, makes sense. So I think, in an exercise like that, AI is fantastic because it's giving you the things that you don't know and it's delivering them quickly. You still have to verify them and you still have to ask questions. For our industry, I think journalists who don't ask enough questions, who rely on the questions of others, I think there's a potential for them to be replaced by AI. These people that go into these news packs and these gaggles, that are living on somebody else's, question, which generates an answer. Right. I mean, that's problematic. I mean, because now you've got devices built in AI that can monitor that as well and beat you to the post, right? And so, like, what is it that you're doing differently? What are you bringing to it? AI can help. AI is not a magic bullet.
Yeah, agreed. I've heard. I forget who I was talking to recently. They said, it's a mirror too in many ways. Gen AI is.
Right now it is.
Yeah, right now it's rapidly. Other things are changing, but that's a whole other episode. I could do a whole other episode on that. Okay, let's. I like getting everybody's take on this, and we just talked about how incredibly fast AI is moving and everything's happening. But if you had to flash forward 5 years, where do you see yourself? Where do you see the Center Square? Your organization, like. Even like the local media industry at large, that might be a harder question, but how do you see the next half a decade playing out?
I think bigger, faster, and still doing the same thing and doing that for the benefit of the industry as a whole. I think most Americans continue to be underserved with regard to government accountability coverage. I think our growth, literally from 0 to over 1,300 partners in the last 7 years proves that there's an appetite. I mean, in 5 years, I want TCS, to be the undisputed first read for anyone who wants to know how their tax dollars are being spent. And I want us to be in the same conversation as the AP when people think about essential newswire infrastructure in the United States and where they have a great global concern. We don't. This is built, here in the United States for the benefit of Americans. So the principles we operate on, they aren't proprietary. Other newsrooms can adopt them, and the overall quality of accountability journalism improves. That would be a big win for the public. I think for us, it's the discipline that's what's rare and not the idea.
Very cool. Yeah, I always struggle. I've been thinking about removing that question because it's hard to even see what it's going to be like in 3 months from now. But good takes. I agree. Bigger, faster, stronger. Is that how you framed it right at the beginning there?
Pretty close.
Can you just say where people can find you, Chris? What should I link to and everything and all that?
Yeah,
I mean, find you online, Center Square. Yeah,
absolutely. Go to thecentersquare.com. I mean, our entire work sits in repository there. I mean, read us and call us out in your local news outlet if you can. The awareness doesn't hurt. It's not the easiest thing in the world for a newswire that's running in as many different places as we're running to be like name recognized. But yeah, I mean, keep an eye on us at thecentersquare.com.
Awesome. I'll link to all that. This is fun. We're going to have to do this again. And I got to give us like 90 minutes at least.
I'd love to do it.
Make sure my schedule isn't back to back like this one.
No, these are the conversations that I think that we have to have as an industry, right?
They're great. I love it. And I love talking to folks as smart as yourself with your kind of mindset and everything. So
compliment of the day, brother. I appreciate you. It was awesome to spend time with you.
And congratulate your dog. She made it the whole way through without going crazy on the
She's
contractors.
sitting right here. She's been great.
Yeah, good,
She's
good
been
girl.
great.
Good girl. All right, Chris. Let's stay in touch, man. I'll hit you up soon. And thank you again for coming on. I
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
My pleasure. And congratulations on what you built with the podcast.
Thank you.
I think it's great. It fills a terrific niche in the industry, and
Awesome.
you should be very proud of what you got going on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. All right. Cool.